So first to start, who here has never seen a Kamen Rider series? Alright, to introduce Kamen Rider, in 1971, a manga author by the name of Shotaro Ishinomori created a superhero manga called, well, an anti-superhero manga called Skullman. It was kind of a big hit. Toei wanted to do a TV series on it, but it was too dark in material. So they asked him to do something else. So he created a grasshopper-like superhero called a Kamen Rider, which stands for Masked Rider when you translate it. This series and manga went on to be a big hit. For those who don't know some of Ishinomori's works, he has done Cyborg 009, Gilgamesh. He has done, not Devilman, that's not it.
That's Go
That's Go Nagai. Well, yeah, Skullman, Kikaider, Hakaider, and several others. He was also the one who did also create Super Sentai after Kamen Rider's success. So Kamen Rider's themes are bug-themed superheroes, most of the time a grasshopper, and usually the Kamen Rider is created by the villain of the story. In the original series, the Kamen Riders were normal people that were turned into cyborgs by the enemies. And then something would happen so they would not turn on humanity, and they went out to defend humanity. So the series has had several shows that progressed up until 1989 with Kamen Rider Black RX, which those who know Power Rangers and Saban, that became Masked Rider.
Never watch it.
In the 90s, there were 3 movies, and that was pretty much it. Then in 2000, Kamen Rider Kuga launched what's known as the Kamen Rider Heisei era. This continued the trend, but tried to do new things with the franchise. They try a whole bunch of different ideas. Some of them were more kind of like a police drama in a way. Some were comedic. Some were like a live-action anime. One significance is there was a series called Kamen Rider Ryuki, which had a card theme. Then they had Kamen Rider Blade, years later, that was another card theme, and Decade was a card theme. So this is Kamen Rider, the original card games on motorcycles.
Jack.
You say?
There's something you should know.
What is it you say?
I came
What?
to this city
Oh,
to give you a message. Card games on motorcycles.
card games on motorcycles!
Card games on motorcycles.
Crow, did you hear that? Card games on motorcycles!
Card games on motorcycles.
Card games on motorcycles.
Card game on motorcycles!
Card games on motorcycles.
Card games on motorcycles!
Card games on motorcycles.
Card games on motorcycles.
So the first series I'm going to talk about was actually the first one that launched the card games, which is Kamen Rider Ryuki. Now, Kamen Rider Ryuki's cards are kind of like gaming cards. Think of Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, and so forth, where all the cards would act as their weapons, their points. And also this series was kind of like Highlander of the Kamen Rider world. There were 13 riders, depending on if you count the movies or not. And they all had to battle each other, and the last one remaining would be the one to be able to make any wish they desire.
So, like the Grail War?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually.
So show the intro for...
Legit opening?
No.
What's that?
Legit opening?
Oh, it's mine.
No.
Oh, okay. It's Queen's song from Highlander.
I know.
So Kamen Rider Ryuki, the first rider of the series, his name is title Ryuki. He has a secondary rider named Knight, who was a rider before him. Ryuki ends up getting his powers by accident. Now, like I said, these cards are kind of like gaming cards with point stats. They get to be used as weapons. And so this is one of those times when the secondary rider also came before the main hero rider. So show Ryuki and Knight.
Okay, pause after this.
So as you just got a little bit there of Kamen Rider Ryuki and Knight, you saw they put in cards in their devices and they got their weapons. They do their finishing moves that way. Well, like I said, this series has multiple riders in it and they have set to fight each other. Now the next batch of pretty much the secondary main characters are a lawyer who is Kamen Rider Zoda, a psychotic convicted criminal serial killer named Oja, who is the most fun character in the show. You know this guy's crazy because he just goes in the show, he goes right into a restaurant, grabs a kid and pulls a gun to his head and says, "Bring me my lawyer." And there's a bunch of other ones that they may be gone after 2 episodes. Sometimes they're there for about 4 or 5. So here's a video clip of Oja and Zoda.
いい感じだな。アドベント。アドベント。
Please put down your weapon. You have 20 seconds to comply.
ユナイトベント。 ファイナルベント。
last rider you saw there, he is Kamen Rider Odin. He is essentially the ex machina of the series who needs to be there every time that they need another rider to have him fight. And so he shows up 3 times in the series and pretty much gets killed all 3 times. Some say that there were deleted scenes and deleted scripts where the guy who was giving out the cards gave the Odin card to a bum on the street and offered him whatever he wanted to defeat all the riders that were left. Others say that they're that character, Shiro Kanzaki himself. Toei hasn't said anything on what is true, and as far as we know, it's just a random character that appears when needed. So one thing that's also common with Kamen Rider series, common, is upgrade forms. During Kamen Rider Black RX, the Kamen Rider Black, he started to get multiple forms during the show. This continued into the Heisei era, like Kuga could transform into different body types. So of course it's only fitting that Kamen Rider Ryuki has upgrade forms. Now in this series, both Knight and Ryuki get an upgrade form with new cards called Survive cards. Again, Knight gets his card and upgrade first before Ryuki, which is again different from series that will come later, where usually the main rider gets all his upgrades before the secondary rider gets them.
You activated my own code.
Do I make you horny, baby?
Sorry.
So that's just a little bit about Kamen Rider
I
Ryuki.
think I did it right.
Just leave it.
I will. It'll probably go back. But I didn't go back.
So obviously these series are 50 episodes in length, so there's never time to really talk about the entire series in one time frame, especially when you're covering multiple series. Well, with Ryuki done, yes, Kamen Rider Blade technically comes first. However, the next one, I'm jumping ahead to Kamen Rider Decade. Now, one thing about Decade is these cards are based on previous Kamen Riders. So they're going to, so Decade gets a bunch of cards that just allows him to transform into additional riders. And he gains their abilities. Yes. Just let it go. Now with Kamen Rider Decade, it just essentially starts the multiverse series, where all the different Kamen Riders from the Heisei era are in their own universe, spread across a multiverse. If you are a fan of DC Comics and Marvel Comics, you know that sometimes that can get overwhelming. Well, so Decade starts out that way, where it's all just one, just set for those 9 other universes from the Heisei series. Then things got a little out of control, and they started to bring all the Showa era stuff into it. But nonetheless, he could take a card from a Kamen Rider and use it to transform into them.
You could say this is a common card.
Henshin! Kamen Rider Decade!
My name's Barry Allen. I am not the fastest man alive.
So you saw there, he used some of their abilities. However, he can also even use the Kamen Riders themselves as weapons, which is a lot of fun.
ちょっとくすぐったいぞ。
ファイナルホームライド。おい、なんだ。これはファイナルアタックライド。
ちょっとくすぐったいぞ。いいから。
Alright, so next, like I talked about in Ryuki, of course, he has to get an upgrade form. Now, the difference with his upgrade form is that it pretty much utilizes the powers of all the riders in one suit. You want to show it?
Yeah. You look at me, I'm looking at.
So if you looked when he was doing that, when he gets his upgrade form, anytime he summons another Kamen Rider, they're actually in their ultimate form as well. So Kiba there was in his Emperor form, he has Blade in his King form, he has Ryuki in his Survive mode. Decade also introduced a second Kamen Rider, as per the franchise staple, by a guy by the name of The End. One of the aspects about The End is he could actually use the abilities, and he had cards of the villains of the Kamen Rider series, along with the movie riders. So there were a lot of characters that only show up in the Kamen Rider movies, which most of the time are non-canonical with the series. So again, making another weird multiverse story. In fact, in Decade, The End is actually from a universe where the evil riders are pretty much the ones who rule the earth.
Kamen Rider.
So, like every Kamen Rider series except for Black, the secondary rider, if he comes in as an enemy, he ends up making friends with the main character and they become a superhero team. This happened since the beginning in the original Kamen Rider series with Kamen Rider Ichigo and Nigo in the manga version. Because in the manga, Nigo started out as one of the Kamen Riders that were under Shocker's control, and Ichigo got him back to being free to help him fight humanity, for humanity. In the original TV series, the actor who played Hango Takeshi, the first Kamen Rider, he actually broke his leg doing a stunt. So they just threw in a secondary rider just because they needed to give him time to heal, but they couldn't put the show on hiatus. So ever since the very first series, there's usually always have been a secondary rider. So in this series, Dien comes in, they kind of duel each other, and then he starts to pretty much work with them as the series progresses. And they work as a team. Well, also another Heisei series is a series called Kamen Rider Hibiki. Hibiki was an Oni series. They were Onis, they used music. Well, that series had a big writer change because toy sales were so poor on the show, which completely changed the ending. Due to what they were able to do with Decade, where they could go and revisit it, they actually redid some of how Hibiki was planned to go in the episodes of Hibiki from Decade. threw that in there just for fan service.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
But as you saw, all the riders in that were working together, which does happen a lot. Well, rewinding time back a few years beforehand, we had Kamen Rider Blade play the opening.
Lucky intuition played a card with big to start. And after he's been hooked up, played the one that's on his heart. Oh, 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 oh. Pick him hard, show him what I got. Oh, 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 oh. Kill him loud, no we can't read him out of the face. Shouldn't have got nobody. Kill him loud.
So now Kamen Rider Blade comes around, and the whole premise of the series is playing card based. Basically, there are 52 monsters called undead, and some scientists found these ancient cards that held these creatures and wanted to play 52 card pickup. So they ended up, by mistake, releasing all the monsters across the world and had to recapture them. Well, in the series, the different playing cards represent their different levels, just like regular playing cards do. The ace cards are the cards the characters use to transform. So the first character is Blade, Kanzaki. He is Spade. And he is pretty much a Kabuto Beetle design. So show a little bit of Kanzaki.
Time up.
So as you see there, the rider has to beat the undead and entrap him into another card to stop him from taking over the earth. Now in Kamen Rider Blade, the purpose of the undead is that every few thousand years, all these undead would battle each other in a giant battle royal. The winner of the battle royal would then become the dominant species to populate the earth, to rule it. So during the last battle royal, humanity took over. The human undead won. So now we move to our second rider, Garen, whose name is Tachibana, which is a pretty significant name with the Kamen Rider franchise, because Tachibana was the name of the mentor, Hongo Takeshi, in the original Kamen Rider series. So that pretty much became a staple of the franchise, where there would usually be some type of mentor figure with that name. And Garen is the card on diamonds. an interesting one. His name is Chalice, and he's based on the heart. The other Kamen Riders of the series have a regular henshin device where they have to, a belt forms around their body, and they put the card into it. The difference with Chalice is that the belt will just emerge, and he just slides his card, swipes the card through essentially a card reader. There's a reason for this, but I'm not going to go into spoilers on that aspect for those that have not seen the show. But here is a clip of their Chalice.
奴を封印するのは俺だ。何？変身。
Sorry.
Alright. So the next rider, he just wanted to join in on the club.
It's true. It's really true.
So he is Lingo, and he is the rider of clubs. Now one thing you might notice is with their weapons, back in the olden days, their weapons are actually based on what the house of cards was at that time. Like originally, the spade, way back in the medieval times, was a sword, which is why Blade has a sword. Garen has a gun, even though technically Garen is kind of based on rings. Chalice has a bow and arrow, essentially, and then Lango here has a scepter. And this is Mutsuki, who originally, when he becomes a rider, he's actually, the card itself, the undead card, actually let itself be captured, so he could take over the body of whoever was going to be the rider itself. So throughout a lot of the series, Mutsuki is actually fighting with the undead, the spider undead, for control of his body. Because a lot of times the spider undead will just transform Mutsuki himself and go out fighting under his control.
I'm bringing sexy back. The mother boys don't know how to act.
Casey! Over now.
You know you love me.
15 years.
They don't care. They don't want to hear about that. They want to hear about this and how awesome I am.
You're not awesome.
So Those were the 4 main riders. Now, technically speaking, if you just take by their base forms, Lengo is actually the most powerful of them. He has the ability to actually unseal undeads from their cards. So he has his own card. When one scene, the Blade and Garen go running at him, use an attack, he swipes a card and the ability unseals those undeads from their cards. So they have to go and get them again. Now, one interesting aspect about Kamen Rider is that this series really utilizes their motorcycles as actual weapons into the show. A lot of the times, the motorcycle is just there for a toy sale and a gimmick because that's what it started with. In this series, those motorcycles can be used as henshin devices, they can be used as weapons. So let's show a little bit of that.
Card games on motorcycles!
The use of motorcycles is one of the things I really also think makes Blade an outstanding series and why it's actually my personal favorite Kamen Rider series. Like I said, it really uses it, the theme of it. Now we come back to another common item, the upgrade forms. Now with Kamen Rider Blade, the first set of upgrade forms are Jack forms. However, Garen and Blade are the only ones to actually receive these forms, as they are the first ones to receive the Queen card, acts as a fusion card, and then they use it with the Jack to get Jack forms. Then they have the next up forms are Chalice acquires, when he has acquired all 13 of his cards, he gets an upgrade called Wild Card form, and Blade, of course, has King form. So these next clips are of the upgrade forms, while poor Lengo is left without any type of upgrade.
House over Queen, Fusion Jack. House over Queen, Fusion Jack.
You get already know that
Let's get out.
Evolution key. Spade 10. Spade Jack. Spade Queen. Spade King. Spade Ace. Royal Spread Flash. Evolution.
Jumping, shimmy, Christmas, it's an homage to me.
Alright. So those are the three series that dive into using cards as their theme. And they were doing card games on motorcycles way before Yu-Gi-Oh! So, as I said, there were playing cards, you had gaming cards essentially, and cards that were just riders turning into other riders. I wonder if they had to get copyright for that. But, does anyone have any questions on any of the series? Yes?
In Blade, what about the Joker cards?
What's that?
Weren't there like Joker cards?
Yes. There is a 53rd undead called the Joker Undead, and basically, if he is the last remaining undead, giant humanoid cockroach creatures pretty much are there to wipe out all of humanity. There is a lot more dealing with the Joker. I don't want to go into spoilers because that one is something that everyone should experience for themselves. Yes.
I don't have a question, but I just want to point out an interesting fact. The character Tachibana actually goes on to play a character in a later series, Kamen Rider Forze. He actually plays one of the enemies.
He is the principal of the school.
Yes.
Right.
All right.
Anybody got questions on any other Kamen Rider series that we might be able to answer?
Nope. All right. Well, then I hope you guys have enjoyed this panel. Have a great convention. See ya.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.